You are living in the most dangerous time in American history.
We won't take a single back step.
Former professional basketball player is now the Republican Party's choice.
Can you imagine Royce White, the U.S. Senate?
White won the endorsement on May 18th with 67% of the vote.
There's nothing that guarantees we win, but I guarantee you if we lose, we will die. Welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGit.com. That's TireGit.com. You have to buy your tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us and help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and today we have another incredible HEBROES edition for you on the Please Call Me Crazy podcast. The great Professor Penn is in the studio with us again. Welcome back, Professor Penn.
Good evening to everyone. Glad to be here. Great.
Welcome back. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio again. If you're not familiar, please subscribe, like, and comment on the Professor Penn podcast, which usually premieres 7:30 p.m.
Tuesdays
Central
and Thursdays.
On Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Yes, but tonight, Thursday night, we're recording on Thursday. We putting up this Thursday or Friday? When are we going up with this?
It's going up Friday. So
going up Friday. Okay,
yesterday.
So for all my audience,
Yeah.
we weren't up Thursday because, and we should share this, that our producer, Tanner, his grandfather passed away.
Yeah.
So this morning, instead of being in the studio, he went to that funeral, and we think that that's, we want to wish him condolences. I mean, he was, actually, he's pretty close with his grandfather and his father, which is a nice thing.
Yeah.
Suffering. So we'll be back up with Professor Penn podcast next Tuesday night.
Professor Penn, ladies and gentlemen, we're in the studio live, belly of the beast. I guess it's not live. It's live when we're doing it. It's live right now.
We're live. We're live, right?
We're live and in effect. You guys will be seeing it tomorrow night. But good evening to everybody again. We're glad to have you back. If you watched the podcast on Wednesday night, I talked about the prospect of annexing Canada and Mexico, the great country of Mexico, where some of my forebears were originally from.
The first time we talked about this, the very first time, I told you were out of your mind. And you said, no, this has to happen. I said, I have a lot of friends in Mexico. Let me check with the natives. And what I found out was there are a very significant number of Mexicans, particularly in northern Mexico, that are very amenable to the idea of being part of the United States of America. And I found out that the Mexican people have a idiom or it would be a slur. They call these folks Whitexicans. I mean, you were a little, and then as time has played out, and I've watched the trade policy very closely because being in business in Mexico and paying attention to what's going on there, and looking at the very corrosive impacts of that open border, both to immigration, drugs, and then to international trade, it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I told you I was mad at you because you were right on this one. I did you get my text? I said that I hate you because you're you're 2 years ahead of your time on this deal because President Trump is talking about using the U.S. military to interrupt the flow of fentanyl up into the country. But it's not just fentanyl. It's all the goods. The Chinese are using Mexico as a staging area to ship products that they cannot get across the U.S. border. They're shipping them into Mexico. The Mexican cartels relabel the stuff as a product of Mexico, and they ship it up duty-free under the USMCA across that very porous southern border. And I have a business in Texas, and I'm going to tell you, the smuggling in Texas, whoa, it's heavy duty. It's actually a corrosive problem. It's a governmental problem because when you have that kind of money getting made on all kinds of illegal trade, a lot of people in law enforcement and in government get on the payroll and turn a blind eye to it. It's a problem. I think Donald Trump is about solving problems, breaking some eggs. I don't think he really, when people say he's going to be a dictator or tyrannical, I think that it's going to require some extraordinary methods and means to actually address some of the problems that we're facing as a country. And I mean, we got to support him. I mean, we can't go halfway on this. I personally support the use of whatever means possible to close our borders, because you can't make any money as a business person when there's no rules.
So you're saying we should annex Mexico?
I'm saying we should at least get that border closed first and see what happens next. Now, I don't think the Mexicans are going to be too satisfied with that concept, but I think a lot of Mexicans would be very happy to see U.S. military go down there and go to town on those cartels, which really, in essence, is probably...
What's your read of the history of the war between us and the sovereign border drawn between ourselves and Mexico in the first place?
Well, there was a war between the United States and Mexico in 1848. And, I was watching on X, and somebody said something about taking over Canada and said that's manifest destiny. Somehow I think it might have been a meme, but we had a concept in this country which was related to the British business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy, and related to a certain kind of racial supremacy, kind of a Darwinist impulse.
Mm-hmm.
To take over the United States of America from sea to shining sea. And we ran into a little problem. The French had a big swath of the country as their colonial possession, and so did the Spanish. And when the Mexicans drove the Spanish askew and became their own sovereign nation, they still, I think people know that California and Arizona, New Mexico, Texas were actually all originally part of the country of Mexico, and that we appropriated it. It's a little bit beyond cultural appropriation. They could keep their culture. We just took it's called piracy. We just took it away. And we have taken this over. And the whole idea, and you've heard this, and I think a lot of the listeners and viewers have heard it, the Mexican people call Americans gringos.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean? It means that the U.S. military that went down into Mexico and conquered and took and stole that land were dressed in green. And the Mexican people would say, green, go, gringos, green, go, get out of here. And that's where gringo comes from. But actually, having been in Mexico many times, many times, they're not anti-American. They don't hate America. They actually like them. They like America. They like Americans.
But do their leaders?
Well, their leaders are communist right now.
Yeah.
I mean, if Camilla the Communist Harris was the new president of the country, hey, we would have been together toot sweet. Everybody would have been on the same page. This has thrown a monkey wrench in the globalist plan, having this opportunity to have President-elect Trump inaugurated on January 20th. But yeah, the woman that's down there, Claudia Sheinbaum, which I read a lot of stuff on X about that she's Jewish, and it's a Zionist thing. No, she's an anti-Jew. She's a communist. She doesn't have any Judaism in her at all. She is a subscriber to the philosophy of Marx, not to the philosophy of Moses. And she was actually duly elected by the Mexican people. Once elected, and the communists got control of every branch of Mexican governance, they're going about changing all of the institutions of Mexico such that the comunistas will be in charge in Mexico for a very long time. Unless, of course, President Trump gives them an offer they can't refuse. For example, if President Trump was to impose the 25% tariff at the border on Mexican products being exported to the United States, that would hurt the Mexican people. When President Trump says, oh, let me clarify this. Give me a minute, Royce. This is very important.
Yeah.
When President Trump says Mexico is going to pay for it, he's exactly right, but he's not telling the entire story. If there's a 25% border tax on Mexico, and not to give everybody an economics lesson on currency, but there's a relationship between the United States dollar and the Mexican peso. And if trade is interrupted or truncated between the two countries, the Mexican peso will devalue. That would really, in large part, offset any kind of border tax. So the price of the goods probably would not go up very much. And in fact, the United States government, because it's about $1 trillion going around here in North America between the USMCA partners, we the people pick up a $250 billion bump in our very, very precarious budget. The price of goods probably wouldn't go very much higher. And when President Trump says the Mexicans would pay for it, when the currency devalues in Mexico by 25%, the people lose 25% of their purchasing power, which is going to piss them off because they're poor. They might advocate for political change and restore the Republic of Mexico. See, there's all kind of effects that can happen from President Trump because our political class has been living off of these problems my entire life. They create the problem, they profit from the problem, and they don't want to solve the problem because it's such good business for them. President Trump really clearly to me wants to solve a set of problems. And we were on the last HEBROES, we were talking about this. You're saying, well, let's presume that the endless war ends, the budget gets balanced, and the border is solved.
Yeah.
What's next? And what did you say? What was your policy issue?
The dollar.
No, we were talking about AI.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's the great existential threat for, in perpetuity now. That's just kind of.
That's what I want to talk about. What are we doing?
That's kind of on mankind's docket now for forever.
And if you missed this, if you as a viewer or listener missed Royce, he said something that really is worth repeating, which is, who's programming the AI? The same psychopathic people. We're all psychopaths in our own kind of weird ways. How are we, as human beings, with all of our problems and all of our pitfalls and all of our addictions and all of our failings, in a position to program an intelligence which is going to be more powerful than our own? How can this have a good result? I think that was an excellent point, and the kind of point that should give all American citizens a pause to say, what are we doing with this technology? And I think that's the issue of our day. I agree with you. Since you're the politician, you don't like being called. Since you're what will we call you? Are you a politician now or are you a candidate?
I'm an ass kicker.
Smash mouth. Oh, hey, TireGet.com. Royce is so focused on the message. TireGet, that's an e-commerce tire service where you can get the tires mounted in your own backyard. And I want you to remember, if you're watching Royce's shows and you'd like to support his broadcast, which I certainly hope you do because it deserves support, the content is great and I know you love it. When you go to TireGet and you're picking out your tire, which you can call in and I'll help you, at checkout, in the promo code box, add Smash Mouth. That's right, Smash Mouth, which is Royce's chosen promo code, and you get 3% off just because you put in Smash Mouth. So I just want to throw that in there because, young man, you don't tell your listeners and your viewers that they get a 3% discount just for using your promo code. I don't know how you're going to add that.
Say it again.
Smash Mouth.
Oh.
Promo code Smash Mouth.
Promo code Smash Mouth.
3% off on the tires.
Wow.
And it's Christmas time.
Christmas time. Everybody needs tires, especially in the winter.
Everybody needs knickknacks for Christmas. We never do this on the show because we care about the message, but we want to expand Free People Radio, the programming, the reach. So you have a very loyal following of people that love your work. They got to buy a coffee mug anyhow for Christmas. Go to the Free People store. T-shirts. I'm going to spend it anyhow. I'm going to buy my knickknacks for my gifts at the Free People store this year. I'm just telling you. Got to buy it from someone, might as well buy it from Free People, right? You're looking at me. We don't normally pitch like this, but we got to get it going. We got to get it going. But back to the technology. The technology is it's out of control.
Yeah. Oh, that's way out of control. But going back to this annex thing, I think it's kind of counterintuitive to the idea that globalism and forever wars are a problem. I can see where people would say that's hypocritical. Like, oh, you don't want a forever war, but you're willing to go fight a Mexico that's going to surely produce an insurgency like we've never seen before. I think the insurgency in Mexico would potentially be worse, if not just as bad as the insurgency we faced in the Middle East. Maybe not across the entirety of the Middle East, but on a per country basis. I think the Mexican insurgency and the cartel insurgency may be just as bad, especially if you consider all of the ancillary drug networks that flow down into Central and South America.
And the presence of the Chinese all over Central and South America, which is really, I think, what's driving President Trump. I think fentanyl is part of it, but also the Chinese are funding that fentanyl. They're laundering the money on that fentanyl. They're providing the chemical precursors. That's why when President Trump said to Canada and Mexico, it's 25% if you don't, show up with a closed border, he also threatened the Chinese with an extra 10% above the 25% he already handed them. Because really, come on. We're not really acting in goodwill in the family of nations, are we? If 80,000 Americans are dying a year of fentanyl, for 10 years, that's 1 million people almost. And that's what we're dealing with. So and what Claudia Sheinbaum said, of course, was, we're not the problem, it's the demand side problem in the United States. And that's something to talk about, too. The demand side problem is a failure of who? Our parents, our schools, our churches. Why do so many American people want to get high all the time?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, that's something that I think we need to address.
No doubt.
As part of the Republicanism movement, because Republicanism is a path of redemption, and redemption includes well-being. That's why we're Republicans, is for well-being.
My question is, if a war, potential war, an annexation, a strengthening of the border on our southern border, on our home front southern border, is much more of a righteous and divine war than to defend a border a world away.
That is a war of necessity.
Right.
It's not a war of discretion. Yes, sir?
Yeah. Put that right in the...
Try to keep it on a down low. I'm sorry. No, the border, defending our people, that becomes a righteous war to defend our fellow citizens, our neighbors.
Yeah.
And to go gallivant around the world as the world's hegemon and defend everybody's borders, well, that means nobody has a border, which is what the point is. Globalism is there's no borders.
Right.
That's their ultimate endpoint. There won't be any border problems because there'll be no borders. Right?
Right.
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 So who's the loser and who's the winner on that deal?
Well, I think that a border down in our, a war down on our southern border, or even going into Mexico, is a much more reasonable and justifiable war than the wars we've been fighting up until this point. Even into Canada, if need be. Because I told people on Wednesday that we talk about this geopolitical jump ball. If everybody's going to expand their borders, and China's going to go after Taiwan at some point. It's just a matter of when. Maybe they don't. There's a scenario where they don't, but it's obviously being the tension in the South China Sea is so undercovered. Reported by the mainstream media for the most part. At least your mainstream industry media, here in America. You might read it on a headline because there's a lot of headlines. The newspapers and outlets have almost become,
Public relations,
an infinity gauntlet of headlines. There's 1,000 headlines a day. It's just, but there's no real emphasis placed on how high the tensions are in the South China Sea. So even, China, Taiwan, Russia, the former Soviet Union, the Middle East, and however that shakes out. Whether you look at it as Israel expanding its borders or the Middle East trying to, joust for position themselves, because, they're no friend to one another, really, when you look at it. All of the, we are the Muslim Brotherhood, cross versus crescent, east versus west is a bunch of bullshit. Erdogan is no friend to, Iran, and Iran is no friend to Saudi Arabia and the Yemenis and the Qataris, and they're all running their own game. So all of them, though, are trying to expand their footprint in their respective, backyard neighborhood. shouldn't America consider doing the same, or should we just subsidize and fund all these other nations doing it?
I'm not into subsidizing any of these people.
Right.
And I'm into...
but we're going to do what one way or another. My point is the thought process or the decision that's made about expanding America will probably be indicative of what the thought process is regarding subsidizing the rest of the world's expansion.
Hey, if it's a full on throwdown, I mean, if it really, because the dogs of war, they've let them slip, but they still got them on a loose leash. But if it's all the way, hey, everybody's going to grab everything they can grab. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
And you look at it strategically, geostrategically, the Chinese just opened a $3.5 billion international port in Peru. And there's a call like, what happened to the Monroe Doctrine? Hey, stay out of our hemisphere. And there's calls. No, I noticed Mike Lee, I think it was, Senator Mike Lee, or maybe it was J.D. Vance. You know, there's this cry now for a reboot of the doctrine of, hey, stay out of our hemisphere, the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah.
But they're there. I mean, the fact is that we, the people, have lost the economic and political juice in Central and South America. So if there was to be a war, we have the Chinese right in our border. I'll tell you a funny story that I'm aware of as being in the tire business. There's already been the construction of one Chinese tire factory in Mexico, which is right on our border. I mean, that's basically in the United States because it's bound by a free trade agreement that the United States is in. And there was another one that I know about. And when President Trump threatened the 25% tax at the border, that group put their project on hold. But the incursion of the Chinese economically into Mexico, into Central and South America, is far beyond what is ever reported in the mainstream media. Nobody's thinking about it. We don't have the influence in our backyard that we enjoyed for decades. Canada is a Chinese vassal state right now. Every product up there is made in China.
Yeah. Well, so are we by that standard.
Well,
Not the same. Not to the same
it's
extent.
heading that way, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not there yet. China is really integrated into the supply chains of Canada. Yes.
Yeah. That in and of itself is a reason to consider making Canada the 51st. And what do you think the benefits would be legally, governmentally, to add Mexico and Canada to the union as states? Well, what would the legal benefits do? What would it give us the power to do? Would it give us legal jurisdiction, federal jurisdiction over their borders as well?
Well, Canada
Trade.
and Mexico is completely two different cases. I mean, we share a much closer culture with the Canadians than we do with the Mexicans.
Right.
We share a language in most of the country, except for Quebec. But interestingly, Canada, where I've been many times, they have their own thing going on up there, too. They are probably more resistant to the United States than the Mexicans are. I mean, they really are proud of being Canadians. But when you say what the benefit would be, what legal? Talking about taking something away from somebody. There's no legal. It's called piracy. But if it came to a war, would you say what we'd get out of it is Canada is a very resource-rich country. I mean, the oil and natural resources in Canada are profound. And, that's what Canada's making its money on. That's why Canada's getting along so good with China, because they're buying finished goods from China and shipping the Chinese oil and ore and copper and everything that they're pulling out of the ground. Canada's a mining related economy.
Another good point to make: if China has declared us their national mortal enemy, which by all conventional metrics they have, what good, sane reason would there be to continue to allow our northern neighbor to supply the Chinese with essential goods and resources?
That would be no different than in 1941. All trade with Japan stopped. Before December 7th, there was a lot of trade in North America with the Japanese. The Japanese were doing this kind of mercantilistic thing the Chinese were doing now. They were doing it before World War II. And baby, when that war started, if you're trading with the Japanese or the Germans then, it was called trading with the enemy. In fact, George H.W. Bush's father, Prescott Bush, actually went to jail for trading with the Nazis. So, you do it at your own risk. Of course, I had a Russian friend of mine that told me that there's nothing more profitable than trading with an enemy in a war zone. He said, do you know what a semi-load of eggs will get you if you go into a war zone? So there are people that are going to do that. But I think that's another excellent point. If this thing progresses to where it's all out, how could you allow our northern neighbor to continue to supply our enemy? Because then they wouldn't be our neighbor. That'd be very unfriendly, right?
Well, I mean, by my measure, but I mean, I'm just a dumb basketball player from Rondo, St. Paul. I don't know where I'm from. It is not wise to give your enemies all the materials they need to kill you. That's seen as stupid.
Right. It's a little. Did you see how quick Trudeau got his ass on down to Mar-a-Lago when President Trump said 25%? He was there like within a couple of days. Claudia Sheinbaum, because these countries are United States integrated and dependent.
Anyway.
Donald Trump can make demands on these countries. They can wiggle, but at the end of the day, they're going to accede to his demands. The question is, what is the level of his demand? Who is he going to be? Because, for example, Mexico, the entire gross domestic product of the country, the entire country, is less than that of Texas. So they really don't have much of a choice. And that's the question I'm asking myself these days. I told you we were in the office yesterday. I told you I'm getting a little nervous about this because when Donald Trump came out and threatened the 100% border tax on the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and many other allied countries who are intending to form their own currency and their own currency union. And President Trump said, hey, if you do that, you can wave, I think his exact quote was, you can wave goodbye to the great United States of America, and King Dollar is going to continue to be King Dollar. So President Trump is defending the empire because that is the empire. Am I right? Isn't the dollar the empire?
For sure.
So it's making me a little bit nervous about where we're headed here. Maybe we just don't have the options. I talked to Thomas the Good about this, and he said nobody sees any other options. So there's no other option. And maybe when you become kind of the head of the five families, you're Don Corleone, how do you step down off of that deal? You get killed, right? How do we get off the treadmill of being the world's hegemon, which I believe is unhealthy for the American people, or at least has worked out and proven to me that it makes people poor and unwell, and we're selling out the American citizens to continue in this role as the world's military and economic leader. And we have so many people that like that role. I mean, that's something that they're attached to, like an addiction, like their self-image is tied up. My self-image
It's not really an addiction.
What is it?
I mean, you can't really be addicted to something that brings you no real tangible value.
Well, the ones that have 401ks are getting a tangible value.
Yeah, but I mean, even that's a fugazi. I mean, it has no tangible value. I mean, you can't see it, you can't feel it. It's a fugazi. It's like the stock market.
It's like that scene in what was that? Was that the Wolf of Wall Street?
Right.
Yeah, that was great.
It's like the stock market.
Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, the dollar being the reserve currency is like the stock market. It has no real tangible value. It's just a mechanism and means to one, trade goods and services and settle accounts and things, but more it is the justification for the military-industrial complex to defend all national interests at all times everywhere.
Well, what they're defending, really, if you think about it, is that if the dollar is used as a cross-border trade mechanism, then somebody here in the United States is taking a commission on everything everybody else does, like a bookie.
Right.
They don't care how the transaction goes down. They don't care who the winners or losers are.
Yeah.
They're just taking their piece of the action.
That's there you find moral hazard. That's moral hazard right there.
Well, they're bookies.
Well, yeah.
You know, that's a slippery slope there.
Like Wall Street guys.
Right.
But global. Same thing. Same.
That's the center of globalism is New York City and London.
Yeah.
And so it's about the money, right?
Well,
but if you can imagine sitting in a chair someplace.
I think it's more about the politics. I think it's more about the cover than it is about the money, personally.
Really?
Yeah.
I think the politics is about the money.
Yeah, not really. Not when it's fake. The money's fake.
It's not fake if you got it in your account.
It's still fake, even if it's in your
I'm
account.
not saying it's not fake. I'm saying if you got it and you turn it into real estate or gold or guns, you can take that fake money right now, this inflated.
Right, but they don't need it. That's the point. They don't need the money. The people we're talking about, they don't need the money. They don't need the money to do anything that they're doing. The money's a cover story for the piracy. The money's a cover story for the drugs, for the slavery. The money's a cover story. That's really what the reserve currency's become. It's the cover story for the business model, which is
slavery, drugs, and piracy.
Right. It's not, but they don't need the money.
They already have the money.
They already have the money.
So what's driving them? Okay, now we're going to go right on down the rabbit hole.
It's politics. It's
power.
power.
What kind of politics is it? What is their end game?
Globalism.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. You know, on the Professor Penn podcast,
this is what makes it so hard to stamp out the communist Marxist ideology, is because anytime we get down to a baseline discussion about natural resources and the concentration of wealth and the political corruption that allows it to take place, we find ourselves looking at Karl Marx's description of things and going, yep, he was right about that part. And he was. I mean, we're living in that, which is why it's hard to know whether the globalists are using Marx or you have real Marx ideologues that are using the globalists. I mean, it really doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
They're the same people, really.
And what they're saying,
the neocons too. They're all working from the same frame of reference.
Materialism.
Radical materialism. And my point is, okay, we could play the empire and we could run the dollar thing, as far as we possibly can. But we have to realize we will always give the Marxists and the far leftists and the progressives and all these shine bomb-like people down in Mexico the cultural justification and narrative to continue on spreading Marxism. And it will continue to successfully spread. The socialist mentality will continue to successfully spread so long as the top 1% resort to corruption in order to solidify and maintain their power and wealth. I mean, they could just come out and say that the whole thing's a scam. The money, the dollar's a scam. We have the deeds to the property. We have we own the deeds to the mines with the physical natural resources. We own the oil fields. We own the resources necessary to heat your apartment buildings.
The real stuff.
We own it. And my basketball coach Ken Novak, he made a point today. We were talking to the young men about having some humility, being humble, and having the things you need versus the things that you may see that you want, or that you think somebody else is gonna think better of you because you have them, right? And he was saying he just talked straight to him about welfare. He says, welfare. And he's like, I'm more of on the progressive side of things and thinking that we do need some social program. People do need these programs. But he was like, at the same time, they're only giving it to the poor to keep them quiet. They're only giving it to them. They're only giving them just enough to always stay poor. They're giving them just enough.
I heard a Minnesota governor say the same thing face to face. There was a governor's name was Al Quie. And my mother got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and she went up on the stage, and it was when Barack Obama was running in 2008, and she said, there's all this talk of the middle class. Why aren't people talking about the poor? And then Al Quie walked up there, and he decided to pick up on her theme, and he said, we got to pay these people off, or they're going to
revolt.
Yeah.
They are now.
Right.
No, and now what the scary part is what they've done, which is, really sick and perverted. What they've done is they have warped the poor man's vision of what a decent standard and quality of life is through social media. They've actually used social media as a psyop to warp the average person's or poor person's perception of what materialistic standard their life should have. So not only were they getting screwed before, I mean, royally screwed, which they were, and it was systematic. It's completely systematic. So like Milton Friedman was always saying, you know, if it's really free enterprise, then get the government out of it completely. As soon as you have the government putting constraints that ultimately affect the middle class and the poor, all you're going to have in the end is a resent for government and money.
And more middle class and more poor.
Yeah. And so, you know, they were already screwing the poor over, but to give poor people an insatiable materialism, almost an unreal materialism. I mean, it's one thing to say here, the American dream is to have a house, some kids, a white picket fence, a car, a 2-car garage, 2 cars, and a 401k, and to be able to go to the Florida Keys once a year with the family. It's one thing to say that's the American dream. It's another thing to proliferate a culture where every person's the star in their own reality TV show. They're the lead actor or actress in their own movie.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of people. I was going to say,
and they're going to go to Abu Dhabi or Dubai
wherever
once a year and post pictures of Instagram. And oh, by the way, they got to have all these cosmetic enhancements to whatever part of their body to meet the times, the trends.
I talked about this. I was going to say on my Tuesday night podcast, which I titled Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I read from the Old Testament the story of the Tower of Babel. And what we're talking about is that what you're saying to me, what I'm hearing is that the government is empowering people to build their own towers of Babel. And and when you get your entire society built up into this kind of materialist, Tower of Babel where it's about survival, people are really far from living the kind of lives that would be spiritually satisfied, at least in my opinion. And when you say what the American dream is, I'm going to do some research on this because I think that's the nouveau dream.
Yeah, but it's not even. But it's not even. That's what I'm saying. The humility. This is where people get it backwards. People think that the humility is from the bottom up. It's from the top down. The most profound thing that Christ and the Christian tradition gave the people was a humble sense of life and meaning. And so that was coming from a leader, from a prophet, from the Messiah. So that tells you that the culture, I mean, he wouldn't have bothered. Why bother to talk about the humility and humble standard that one should carry if it wasn't going to bear any weight from the top down? He wouldn't have wasted his time. We would let it bubble up from the bottom up. It didn't.
It was leadership.
It was leadership.
Okay. And
right. So my point is, if the leadership of our country and of our world is to maintain the radical materialism,
the Tower of Babel,
if our ambition is to have so much wealth, power, political control, let's say natural resources
under the guise of survivability,
domination of natural resources under the guise of survivability, and eventually AI. If the project is AI in this dystopian world where everything's so convenient, you just basically can sit around and be immortal, or you could be fat and die, or whatever you want to do. It's the machines and the computers and technology will make it all possible. That is the illegitimate, non-humble means that will destroy the culture at the bottom.
And the argument is it's about survivability, sustainability. They call it sustainability.
Yeah, survivability, right?
Darwinian, very Darwinian.
Yeah,
it's almost like, okay,
it's like Darwin and Marx are like two peas in a pod.
It's the European intellectual tradition.
Yeah.
And that's what was transplanted here. And I think,
but they're antithetical, right? I mean, Marx is on one side and Darwin's on the other side.
How is that?
Well, because Darwin is saying we're always going to have a survival of the fittest, and to the victor goes the spoils. And Marx is saying, nah, because if to the victors go the spoils, you're leaving out the part where the people who the people who aggregate the most power and money and whatever else, natural resources, have usually done it by corrupt means, which makes it fundamentally illegitimate and immoral, which is often the case. But I'm not. But and then where the double cross and triple cross comes is he's not saying it because he actually cares anything about the poor people it affects. He's saying it for his own political power. So you got two Satans there that are kind of undercutting each other, backbiting each other for supremacy. Well, Darwin and Marx.
All Marx is saying is if it's survival of the fittest, then let's band together and overcome these illegitimate masters of industry. It's still survival of the fittest.
Well, he's not really saying that, though, because
but functionally, that's
no, he's not saying that. What he's really saying is, let's pretend like we're coming together with a few people that are really running the show the same way the Darwinists would.
Well, that's correct. That's the scam.
That's the scam.
That is the scam.
They're Darwinists too.
They're selling to the people where the collectivity overcomes the Darwinist impulse.
Right. They're just wrapping Darwinism and collectivism.
They're just getting a new set of masters.
Right.
I mean, it's a pretty good idea.
It's very clever. It's clever.
It's almost kind of, I'm not going to say it.
It's satanic is what it is.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, you got to be that level of intellect in order to come up with something
some way to
effective.
get yourself to the top of the
but we're playing into it because and what Marx did essentially is he made himself the counter. This is a very, very brilliant. This is really satanic, right? I mean, Satan is going to put himself at the other end of whatever the thing is that you can't live without, right? I mean, he's gonna make himself indispensable to your own vices, and so what Marx has done ideologically is he's put himself on the opposite, on the teeter-totter of the ambition for man to rule the world. I'm not talking about a Marxist and communist secularism and rejection of God. I'm talking about a Darwinian secularism and rejection of God. He's put himself on the opposite side and said, as long as you people are going to play this Darwinian game, there will always be an audience for the Marxist ideology. And it's proven true. I mean, how does a Mexico in the middle of a cartel war select for a communist president? I mean, what kind of, I mean, it just proves the point that I'm making is as long as people are going to concede to radical materialism, the Marxist ideology will thrive. And we are stupid and arrogant, just downright fucking retarded if we think we're going to create some Pax Americana that's so profound that there won't be a disparate group of people that stand as a majority. Of course there will be. And this is what Bannon, I mean, this is what makes Bannon so much different than the rest of the conservative movement, and it's why they don't like him. And he says it sometimes. He goes, we're almost so far right, we're left. And, and he talked about the potential alliance with the Bernie folks. And I was one of the early people to kind of caution and say, well, you got to be careful because the socialist populists tend to be secular and anti-God in their worldview. But I do get what he's saying. And it's not that we should let the communists in and run things, but it is to say that the fundamental of the conservative movement has been, the principle has been, America's a great country. You all should be happy to live here. Look at the rest of the world. Look at what we've created. Look at what we've created illegitimately and corruptly for you all to enjoy. And by that standard, where do you get off judging?
Criticizing.
It's exactly what the NBA told me. The NBA says, you got a chance to make millions of dollars playing a game. You're a young black kid from a poor blue-collar family, and you're going to turn it down on moral principle? It was almost as though they had a spiritual rejection of the premise. You would turn down the chance to be in the club on moral principle, right? And we're doing the same thing at scale, at mass. That is the idea. The idea is in the conservative movement. I'm talking about the Christian conservative movement. This is our Achilles heel. We have an infatuation with America's history, heritage, identity that says that America, with all of its flaws, at bottom is still sort of beyond reproach. And if we can do that, I mean, we can play that sort of like fairy tale game. And I'm not saying America's not a great country. I think the ideas of the country, the beliefs of the country are far better than the way that it's been run and the way that they've been applied. But even with that being said, we can play this game like America's this awesome country. But what Bannon was saying and what he continues to say and why the left is so scared of him is if we don't find a way to spread some of this money around, there's a revolution coming. The question is, whose revolution is it going to be? And if you watch American Dharma, I mean, he basically says that verbatim. He says, if we do not find a way to spread some of the honey around, there is a revolution coming. It's coming. And, the journalist was a leftist journalist, and you could just tell that the fear, because, and I said this on my podcast on Wednesday, the left, for all of their purist theater, they're kind of like ideological possession. They pretend like they're purists. A lot of them aren't.
Oh, it got busted big time in this last cycle.
They are chameleonic. They do chameleonic politics.
Chameleonic, that's very appropriate.
Yeah, they're sophists. That's their game. They'll say whatever they need to say. They'll be whatever they need to be. Now, some of them do have an arc that bends towards self-destruction because they're nihilistic. So that is an element of it, but they'll be whatever they need to be. They're not the purest group. We're the purest group. Well, we're supposed to be the purest group.
We're working
right?
on it.
We're working on it, right? And my point in saying that is the left will make an adjustment here.
We're in the process.
I was telling you that last time we did HEBROES last week. I said, now there was a Marx light. We all in the conservative movement are so gum dipped in our own, kind of ideological framework. Everybody talks about Marxism and communism, even me, and it is a great threat. But we almost pretended like we were in the eye of the storm already. No, the storm hasn't even begun. That was just the precursor rains. That was just the torrential rainfall. We have got nowhere near the eye of the storm. The eye of the storm is for the Marxist status quo establishment, corporate and global elites to abandon post and let the thing fail so that a true version of revolution can
whatever that version appears as, because we don't know what.
See, because then once you back them in a corner and you take away all their chips, once you threaten the institutional stability.
And you know what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
They're anticipating this. They're moving to that place,
right?
Proactively,
right?
They don't want to be left with their hands in their pockets.
Right.
They're moving into the same space that our movement is moving towards.
But it can't, and that's well, no, I don't.
Oh,
think
yes,
so.
they are.
No, they're not.
Oh, they are.
No, that's just
yes, they are.
That's top water political fleecing is what they're doing. They're just those are
they're going to go after same voters.
Those are Ed Cranston. That's what I'm saying. That's political. Those are the Ed Cranston fruitcakes.
No, it's Sherrod Brown and the people that are
fruitcakes.
Why are they fruitcakes?
They're clowns.
12-year senator.
Perfect.
18.
Perfect. That's all the verification you need. Anybody who spends more than 12 years in the Senate is probably a fruitcake. I don't mean it sexually.
Well, actually,
I mean it in terms of
their
career politicians.
What I'm referring to is Sherrod Brown said.
No, I know what you're saying. The appeal
but I want
to MAGA politics and blue collar, the working class has been abandoned. That is a scam. What I'm telling you is the real move now is to devolve the thing into an even more raw, kind of bare bones cultural Marxist revolution that doesn't include the institutions. The grassroots has to run a theater that completely cuts ties with the Pfizers and the Googles.
We see them setting that up.
With the Googles and the Pfizers and the universities. They have to cut ties with them now and go to a more
organic,
in the streets, smash mouth, pitchfork and fight. And guess what? Guess what the first example is?
Mm-hmm.
The assassination of the United Healthcare worker. United Healthcare CEO.
It's exemplary for sure.
That is the first example. That is the first political after Trump is elected, and there's this feeling that things could restabilize the furthest of the ideologues have now said, you know, well, we're going to just start shooting these people on, you know, right out in the street in Midtown Manhattan. Political assassination. That's what that was. Now it could have been something else.
It could have been personal beef.
It could have been personal. It could have been money. It could have been, geopolitical. We don't know. I mean, that's a big corporation.
And
but in my heart of hearts,
this guy not caught?
In my heart of hearts, when I saw the way he was dressed, when I'm looking at him,
did he look a little Antifa-esque?
He looked a little Antifa-esque, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
He did.
And it makes and then what really told you, even if that's not the case, let's say this guy was involved in some deep state, just dirty type of, business and whatever. He was obviously going to testify before the Congress. So it's perfectly plausible that it's a political hit. But what tells me where the thing is headed from a, cultural standpoint was the response. That's what you have to watch. You have to watch the response from the grassroots left voters.
Which was what?
Which was, this man is a hero.
The one who shot him.
The one who shot him.
Oh, that's nice.
No, they said it. There were multiple accounts that had traditionally been anti-MAGA, opposed to Donald Trump, anti-fascist, sort of LGBTQ, progressive, far left. The people who are upset that men didn't vote for Kamala Harris, that cohort, they're saying that the man is a hero.
Power to the people.
Power to the people. Oh, and they're going to go there. See, now the tricky part is we don't know how much of that little sliver is being puppeted or how much of it is organic. Now, the puppeted one actually is a better solution. I mean, is a better outcome, I think, because those people still have interest in maintaining the status quo. They're only going to take it so far.
And then at the same time,
if it's an organic revolution, it's going to be on.
It's not organic. It's constructed.
True, but I'm saying,
and the people that run the machine are setting up
what I'm saying
the other end of the pole, which is
maybe
if that happens. Well, the evidence is
what
there.
If? But my point is,
no, the evidence.
My
is
point
there.
is the MAGA movement ready for it to be an actual revolution?
The streets, but
right.
But the point is that it's not as I don't believe
that helps them.
I don't believe it's as organic as you're giving it credit for. I say that because we have Democrat governors all around this country talking about resistance, urging people to resist.
Right.
Our military has gotten together.
Oh,
our
that's
senior
organic.
Military.
That's organic.
Okay, well then.
The question is, are they doing it?
What is the nature of organic?
Well, first off,
if you want to define organic as extra institutional, then I agree with you.
Here's the thing. We don't know. Well, let's put it this way: we don't understand the vertical integration of the ideology of the ideological possession on the left because we don't have it in the MAGA movement. We don't have it on the right. We do in a sense. The neocon
We're working on it.
Well, right, but we don't have. We're not. They're 3 generations ahead of us.
Right, we haven't even figured out what
so
Republicanism
we don't
means.
know how many puppet masters on top actually share a sort of spiritual agreement on the ideological basis, and how many of them are just using it. I'll give you an example. Does the NBA really care about? Does Adam Silver really believe in Black Lives Matter, or does he just use it as a PR tool? I don't think he's actually a far left progressive. I don't think that he's actually a Marxist. Hell, I'll go so far as to say I question whether Barack Obama is. I question whether Barack Obama is. I often find myself questioning whether or not the Marxists, the rise of Marxism in the West and in America is organic and being driven organically by Marxist ideologues, or if the security state and agencies in it like the CIA were smart enough to weaponize Marxism 3 generations ago.
They didn't weaponize it. They just co-opted it.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So, but I'm saying when you look at a guy like Obama, who came from the bowels of Langley, is he really a communist or Marxist, or is he just an opportunistic
operative
globalist
operative?
Right.
And
so we don't know, but I do know the outcome. The outcome is going to be the revolution is going to take a different tone now, and you know what's going to benefit them. And this is what we have to play such a 12-dimensional game of chess now. It's going to benefit them for us to try and stomp them out with institutional power.
That's the whole point. That is the whole point. Is they're setting up the delegitimization of Donald Trump. Because when this goes out into the street and he goes to move to restore civil order, what's the military going to do? You know who told me that was my Chinese friend who you know. And she said to me, yeah, I get it. Because I keep telling her we're at war. And she keeps saying, no, we're not. I said, yeah, we are. This has been going on for 2 or 3 years with this conversation. Finally, when that missile rained down on Dnipro, she looked at me and she goes, geez, is that a nuclear weapon? I said, no. But are you starting to see shit in the skies? It's getting a little bit spooky, isn't it? And she said, what side is the U.S. military on? Domestically. That's how this thing's going to play.
They're on their own side.
Well, right.
We'll see what happens when Pete gets in there and starts pulling the scabs off.
If he's going to make it.
If he's going to make it.
Because they're working real hard.
To delegitimize him.
Oh, he is delegitimized. He went from being a...
Not for me.
Well, hey, he went from being a misogynist to a drunk. That's a quick trip in a week for a guy that is a warrior and seems to be pretty much...
What's wrong with the man having a drink?
Well, they say he's a drunkard, and you can't be around. I heard it on MSNBC just this morning.
Founding fathers were drunkards.
They were?
I would assume so.
I guess what else are you going to do?
I mean, if you're a slave trader, I mean, what would that in having, a couple extra whiskeys be in comparison?
Hey, you're going to have to do something with your free time. There was no movies,
right? But
no
that's
television.
The whole scam, right? It's like these people pretending like they have some moral high ground to judge Pete Hegseth.
That's so awful.
It's so good. It's not
awful.
It's not even awful. It's not even awful. It's just goofy. It's goofy.
Let me just say this. And I do want to say this. The point is this. How can people, this is hypocritical, right? How can people that engage in the exact same behavior, and I mean every one of us, right?
Yeah.
Let he who is without sin casteth the first stone in this sexual area. And in this drug area, we're going to start drawing distinctions on drugs now. Hey, if you're on drugs, you're on drugs. I mean, if you're on drugs, you're on drugs. And we have a society that's on drugs.
My point is, they pretend like they're trying to uphold democracy, and the United States.
They're pretending like they're trying to uphold religion, which is hilarious because they don't believe in God. That's where does this ethic come from? It's religious. It's not democratic. They're saying, I would listen to one of the leftist people say, it was Ann Coulter. Why did I call her a leftist? Well, okay, I'm going to let it go. Her comment was, are we a country that no longer cares about adultery? And my comment is, why were we a country that ever cared about people's free will choices in their private lives? I'm a private citizen. If I want to share with you my private life.
Schism between the schism between Christianity and citizenship right there, yeah.
Talk about that. I want to hear that's a great subject. The schism. Let me say it. The schism between Christianity and citizenship. That's a good subject. That one I'd like to talk about.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, first to go back, I say they don't care about America or the Constitution or human rights or freedoms or let's say democratic elected governments or any of that shit, and they prove it with their complete double standards of who our would-be leaders are today, juxtaposed to our founding fathers. Because if you say that certain leaders today who don't meet the moral
criteria,
they don't even come close to the moral criticisms you would have of our founding fathers, and what you're really telling us is the ideas our founding fathers laid out are illegitimate on a moral basis.
Because they were personally corrupt.
Because they were personally corrupt, right.
Which is an argument.
That is their argument. That's
right.
the whole argument.
Right.
Right. That's why anytime they say, Pete Hegseth or Brett Kavanaugh or Donald Trump or Royce White or, pick somebody. If Tulsi Gabbard was put up, I'm surprised they haven't put a story out about her. Oh, they did. They did. They said she's a Russian asset. So
and a Syrian asset.
I mean,
also.
So anybody who gets put up by Donald Trump is going to be, met with some type of personal attack and critique. And I just, to it, I just say, I'm much less worried about whether or not Pete Hegseth has a drinking problem, because a lot of people have drinking problems. A lot of people have drug problems. The question is, does Pete Hegseth hold any any moral, sort of responsibility in his own person, in his own worldview, that says that he should be remorseful, or I mean, not remorseful, but he should be repentant for whatever his shortcomings are. I had somebody tell me this the other day. It was crazy. I was having a conversation, and they said to me, well, what, Christians just get to ask for forgiveness, and what's the difference if you just, you get to ask forgiveness and all your sins are washed away, but you keep doing whatever it is you're doing. No, that is a very fundamental and important differentiation. The important
self-awareness.
The important differentiation is, do you even believe that sin is real? It's not about whether or not you sin, because we're all you could say blessed or cursed to sin. The question is, do you have a worldview that regards sin as sin? And as such, do you have any type of moral qualms about what you're doing whatsoever? It's like the motif of John Gotti, ordering a hit on, another mafioso or whoever it is, but then he goes to the Catholic Church and prays for forgiveness. And some people will look at that and go, well, he's just using God, the same way they would say the founding fathers were using God. And some of that is true, but there's also the moral line for Christians is, do you believe that sin is real? Do you believe that repentance is necessary? Even if you fall short, that belief will deter and start to shape and influence your behavior, as opposed to believing there is no God, there is no sin, there is no right or wrong. It's completely morally relative. That's a whole different intellectual and spiritual proposition. Segue to the schism between Christians and citizens, Christianity and citizenship is, the Christian should always keep in mind that sin is real, and that the moral responsibility is on us to confront sin and ask for repentance, but it's not to throw that on as a framework onto citizens to have to adhere to from the government. Then that's a clear distinction to make, I think.
So what you're saying is that the use of someone's sinfulness, which is of course hearsay and rumor,
and it's total in its nature, because it's everybody.
But at the start,
it's an unfair standard, because everybody is.
What we're saying is it's ridiculous.
I mean, think about it.
Used,
what Christian can say? What Christian can say
that they didn't sin?
No, well, it's not. I mean, that first. I mean,
right.
That's the obvious one.
Well, that should be the blocker right there.
Which Christian can say that Donald Trump isn't Christian enough? I mean, who are you to say?
Yeah.
It's not. But it's not a casual fucking thing.
It's not a Christian thing to say.
It's not a casual thing to mention. It is a profound and widespread cultural decay of the conservative movement.
Would have the right to judge the spiritual constitution of another citizen. How could you even have the insight into the person unless they're your child or your spouse where you live with them? And even then, I'd have to say, the relationship is so complex and so self-reflective.
I'm not even saying you can't judge them. You can hold judgments. We all have judgments. My thing is, how do you get so deep in the judgment that you bring it to have such a final bearing on your decision and on your view of a person for a political office? That's different. Now, you could judge a person.
But I'm going to go back
personally.
You say we all have judgments, but our judgments are based on evidence that is told to us by someone who's got a vested interest in presenting that information. I don't have any personal awareness of what Pete Hegseth has said. I don't even think there was some letter his mother allegedly wrote. How do I know she wrote it? I mean, we're living in a world where we take this information in as if it is gospel, and it's not.
Right.
It's constructed often to manipulate us.
That's the heresy.
That's an awful heresy.
We take the mainstream media as gospel in place of the gospels.
Yes, that's why I use those words. We're taking the gospels are very clear on this issue. I'm not qualified to judge another man or a woman. I'm only qualified to pull out the log in my own eye, which is a full-time operation.
I think you can have judgment. I mean, it's okay to call the balls and strikes. That's not a problem.
On policy.
No.
On policy.
No. You can call balls and strikes on people's personal character and their actions. the Bible is saying you are not the final judge. You're not the ultimate judge. You can have a judgment.
If we're going to put
The
that
question
standard on our elected leaders that sit in our Congress, the 535, right now, today, Donald Trump is the president-elect. We're in an endless war. Every couple of months, another $1 trillion goes on the charge card, and I'll tell you, that border's open. And that's what these people gave us, and they're going to tell me some kind of moral story that they're married and they got kids and they don't cheat on their wives. Therefore, they're qualified to be my elected representative when the outcome of this is what we're dealing with? No. I'm more concerned about the political outcome.
It's their outcome.
Their outcome is corrupt.
No, that's the whole point.
Well, then to quit covering it up by knocking other people out of the box.
Their outcome is corrupt. They're actually covering for the corruption.
By saying somebody else is cheating,
not Christian enough.
Come on.
No, that's what it is.
I get it, but it's disgusting.
That is the mortal sin.
Oh, man,
that is the
terrible.
mortal sin of the conservative movement.
Yeah,
that is the mortal sin of the Christian conservative movement.
Well, we need to be a Republican
That was
movement.
that was Dustin Gragey saying, the MAGA movement is pulling this party to the left by letting Amber Rose come speak at the RNC convention.
Oh, Dustin Gragey. He's just like the communists. He's all in on the MAGA movement now. I follow him. I read his stuff. I quit commenting because he's, it's not worth my time. But what he's doing is whatever. He actually said Pete Hegseth must be our Secretary of Defense.
Yeah.
The same guy that was criticizing Amber Rose. So there seems to be some slippage on how his moral compass gets applied because there's followers to be found and there's money in clicks, right?
Right.
Doesn't have in my opinion, he does not have one sincere belief. I feel the same way about Broadcorp and Sam Sunder. They're on the payroll.
Yeah.
We're not on the payroll here at Free People Radio.
And by the way, they're all fat. So there's that. And that says something.
I used to say that a lot. I don't.
Well, I mean, you could see the
gluttony.
Well, you could see the lack of a consistent moral standard by a Christian in the Christian ethic when you cast all of these personal aspersions and judgments on people, but you leave out gluttony as though it's a casual sin. It's not. It's not a casual sin at all.
You're starting to sound rather Jewish, young man.
Well, it's not. I mean, that's just straight up and down. And you know what? There's a lot of people in the Christian conservative movement that have the same. Look at Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck is huge and I'm not saying that fat people don't have value or that, fat people aren't patriots or can't be American citizens.
Dog returns to the
But what I'm
vomit.
saying is, again, this is a good way to illustrate how the founding fathers were brilliant to make some separation between our Christian moral judgments and the idea of citizenship, because all of us are flawed, in which case none of us would be qualified to lead. But you can't have no leaders.
Which that's the circle around. Then why are we using a Christian lens of description to discredit citizens who are stepping up to lead?
Right.
Okay, so the whole thing is illegitimate.
Yeah.
What do these people believe? Even if we make certain moral judgments about these people on a personal basis.
Well, I mean, who would, and then it's like,
because who is without what leader are we going to put up there
and it's a way,
that can pass all these tests?
It's a way for the Christian conservative movement in many ways to obfuscate and to, kind of kick the can of leadership down the road so there is no real leadership, so that their political identity can remain abstract and esoteric and sort of personalized in their own individual worship.
And we feel
corny.
So good about it's the Tower of Babel.
It's corny.
It's
corny. It's actually probably one of the most reprehensible things that I've come across, because it's supposed to bear more moral standard because of its Christian tie, and it's probably the most dishonest thing, where these Christians. And we talk about it often, and people go, well, why are you going after the Christians? Why are you going after the atheists? I know who the atheists are. That's an obvious, problem with an obvious answer. You believe in God or don't you? But the Christian one hiding and saying, no political leader is good enough unless they are Christ, leaves a world with no leaders.
Boy, that sounds like some of these evangelical preachers that say that we're citizens
Who are
of
also
heaven.
stealing money, right?
Well, no, not all the time.
Oh, no?
Well, you could say if they're taking a 501c3
yeah,
deduction,
then they're part of the military-industrial complex.
they're certainly on the payroll, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
And that goes back to what I said about who's failing our children, that they're injecting themselves and taking drugs like at this rate. That'd be a failure of the church.
For sure. Don't tell me that, you have some profound Christian standard for our political leaders and you take a 501c3 tax-exempt status and you're in with the same government that proliferated the LGBTQ and Satanism and war for profit, and all of a sudden you're going to stand on some moral high ground and tell me Donald Trump's not Christian enough?
So the answer for that would be to end, and this would put the MAGA movement in alignment with the left-wing populists. Let's end the 501c3 deduction for houses of worship. Render unto Caesar what's due to Caesar.
Let's see how many people get killed outside of Midtown Manhattan hotels when we start really floating that policy. I think we'll see some Antifas in the Christian community come out just as quick as we saw this United Healthcare CEO get clipped.
Are you telling me I'm getting on somebody's sacred ground? I mean I'm tipping over something.
I mean, who? This is my question. Who do these people believe is worthy to lead?
Well, how about this? How about if we got 100 churches and they're all on the payroll and they all have to start paying taxes and we end up with 30 churches because 70 of them go bankrupt? But the 30 that are left, where all the believers are going to go to, become strong, pay their taxes, and start to preach the truth.
Let's just say this.
Cool?
Who is fit to lead? I want to ask like a Jason Whitlock, by your Christian biblical worldview, who is fit to lead? See, and it's not lost on me that people often create a sort of circular argument that ends up nowhere for the prophet.
But you want to know something? That's an interesting point, because that is the exact reason, if you got these people quieted down and in a corner, they'd say that's why we have the institutions. The institutionals and the administrative state bastion against illegitimate leadership. And then what do? You go nowhere, and you got an institution that's corrupt, and you can't even get to the corruption. And if you even say you're going after the corruption, like a Pete Hegeseth, he's personally disqualified. It's interesting, isn't it?
It's brilliant. I mean, it's a brilliant defense mechanism and safeguard.
And now, they're talking about
for the corruption of the status quo.
Guess who they're bringing up for the on-deck circle?
Oh.
That would be Dustin Grage's saint down there, Mr. Ron DeSantis. They're
to do what?
Secretary of Defense, to replace the nomination of Pete.
Give me a fucking break.
I'm just telling you.
Give me a fucking break.
That's the talk around the water. I'm not making it up. That's the talk around the water cooler.
Give me a fucking break. If Ron DeSantis, let me say this.
Was I not telling you yesterday this stuff's starting to scare me? Did I not look at you and say, hey, it's going to take a lot of work to keep these people going down the center of the road? They're diverging over here. I see a divergence towards, like some of these picks in the national scene, Marco Rubio and this guy they got for, they got some very neocon-esque kind of people rolling around in there to deal with the forever war and foreign policy.
Like who? Marco?
Marco's a great start.
Mm-hmm.
A great start.
Who else?
My brain is not giving me the name, but there are some other ones I will come up with.
They're going to say, all of them are going to say that, they've been supporters of Donald Trump before, and they support the America First movement. The question is how much America First policy could actually be moved through the Senate, and you have to have relationships and yada, 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 blah, fucking blah, political capital, just a bunch of mooks, in my opinion. They have no real sacred honor. Like, why would I believe if you wouldn't stand on, with athletes, it's just an easier litmus test of character, because we understand character is most often tested and shown with the greatest of adversity. So if you wouldn't speak the truth with everything on the line and the most to lose, why would I think you're going to speak the the inconvenient and sort of unnecessary by some people's standards, the unnecessary truth when we got all of the levers. You're just going to become a creature of the machine again. If you were a creature of the machine before, you're probably going to be a creature of the machine again. Tell me where a guy stepped up like Matt Gaetz and stood up in the well of the Congress and said, all you people are bought and paid for. Show me where a guy like Eli Crane, puts his neck on the line to go and independently investigate the Donald Trump assassination. I mean, there are some MAGA hitters in there that I actually think have shown they're willing to sacrifice their own personal viability in politics, professionally, economically, for us to trust. And ultimately, that is why people trust Christ.
Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor nominee, neocon. The guy Trump chose.
Is he a neocon?
Yes. And the guy Trump chose to be in charge of the Ukraine.
Why do you say he's a neocon?
We'll go read his history. I mean, we can go look up his history.
I think Waltz is all right. Maybe.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Maybe. Let's go see.
Right.
I thought Pence was okay, too, till you go back and look at his votes.
Pence, the guy with the fly in his head.
Another evangelical Christian, very conservative voting record. Remember? Dustin Gragey saying Ron DeSantis has one of the most conservative voting records in the entire Congress, in the entire country.
But they also say the MAGA movement is not conservative, and they're correct.
Well, and not only that, but the bigger point is anytime you find somebody with a very conservative voting record, it tends to be accompanied by a very pro-military industrial complex voting record.
That's the point.
The two are tied at the hip.
Peace symbol on.
Right.
Okay, we're losing sight already. And then they got this general that they put in charge of the Ukraine-Russia negotiation. When I'm looking at all the Ukraine shills on X, and they're all happy with this choice, they say, oh, this is a great choice. Oh, Donald Trump is thought to have been a Russia hawk in his first term. Now, let me just put the cards on the table. I don't want to be the world's hegemon. I don't want to have a military-industrial complex. You want to talk about revolution? I'm with those people. I mean, if we can just take it apart, deconstruct it, $900 billion for the Defense Department, the argument's going to be the Chinese are going to conquer us. Okay. It's good. It's a good argument to keep this going on.
You're not with the Satanists. I wouldn't say I'm with those people. There's some Satanists over there, so not with those people.
But the idea is, how are we going to get off this Tower of Babel that we're on,
right? Where
we built this materialist empire based on the dollar and the military might of the people. And where is this taking us? And is Donald Trump really going to be the answer? How are we going to walk back from where we're at?
Well, when modern warfare is largely based upon the art of deception, when modern warfare is largely based on the art of deception, it's no wonder why the cultural impulse is dishonesty and lies. Military-industrial complex.
Everybody lies.
The government's lying, everybody's lying. Yeah.
The art of war justifies
all lies.
And we're always at war.
So it's always okay to lie.
And I guess that means that Christianity was a fart in the wind.
Well,
it didn't work, did it?
No, it worked.
Well, it worked for some, but that is the prevailing idea.
No, it's the thread upon which the foothold of the West still has any sacred honor left.
I'm just saying, if we're going to stay in a forever war with the constant belief that we have to, because it's survival of the fittest, then the human impulse that Darwin merely codified has prevailed.
For sure, but
that's not republicanism.
The point of Christianity was never to bring total peace and harmony to the people in the first place until Christ returns. So that's not a reasonable expectation of the Christian faith. The Christian faith is supposed to be a glimmer of hope. That doesn't mean these 501c3 Christians get to pretend like keeping Pete Hegseth out of the Secretary of Defense seat out of some Christian moral standing is legitimate. Those are two separate things, right?
And Lindsey Graham said that
another asshole.
Right. Pete Hegseth's disdain for women in combat. There's so many he wants to be sure this is from Lindsey Graham,
Yeah.
that every woman that enlists in the military has the full respect of the Department of Defense leadership.
Lindsey lighting his loafers, Graham.
But my point is, we're not saying anything about respecting or not respecting women. What Hegseth is saying as a combat veteran, I'm just going to be honest about this. That's what he's saying. I don't support the idea of women in frontline combat. Well, that's kind of a Christian idea, isn't it?
You would think so.
That men are here to defend.
But I mean, we talked about this the other day. We have erected a culture, a feminist culture in this country and around the world, mainly in the West, where we tell women that in order to have independence, they have to take on all of the same threats and risks and responsibilities, physical, financial, economic, political, as the men do, but yet still they should expect that their men be their complete and total protectors and providers in their interpersonal relationships. I mean, the contradiction is so profound, it's laughable.
Goes all the way right to the family
It's
court.
laughable. It's actually
that
laughable.
But that contradiction goes right to the family
For
court.
sure. The marriage court, yeah.
Because, of course, women have all those rights and can take all those responsibilities until the relationship doesn't work out. And then we're going to default to pshaw, I read at the 7th grade level. Right? Which I had my ex-wife.
It's ridiculous.
My ex-wife, who has an MBA and speaks 5 languages fluently, in my divorce, she had somebody analyze her, and they put a paper in that she read at the 5th grade level.
No.
I'm serious.
No.
Hey, it's another Darwinian struggle with the two attorneys.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. I'm very serious about it. I'm very serious. We actually laughed about it afterwards. I actually laughed. I said, come on now. You really did it? She started laughing because she knows it's ridiculous, but she wanted to win. See, you take two people at the height of their moral suffering, their life suffering, and you get these two attorneys in there and turn them against each other to profit from that war. It's a little bit like the Forever War. It's the same kind of Darwinian battle, only instead of Russia and the Anglo-Saxon cartel, it's two unfortunates that have come to the end of their time together, and they're going to battle it out, and those attorneys are going to throw, gas on that fire.
Right.
You can tell I'm not happy about this.
Right.
I'm pissed. You think that young black men are the only victims of the family court. That's not true. There's a lot of...
Oh, I don't think that. I think all men are victims of the family court. I just can't believe how many middle-aged white boomers are willing to cuck for the family court in order to pass their moral judgments.
Right. That's exactly. You took the words
they're
right
getting fucked by it.
Here it is, right there.
Yeah.
That is exactly where I was headed.
I definitely don't think. I'm more shocked. Actually, I'm more shocked that more middle-aged white men don't understand, or at least aren't willing to publicly say, just how corrupt and ungodly the family court system really is. And I'm saying that because we witnessed firsthand how many middle-aged white Republican Party officers, voters, commentators, pundits
wanted to comment
on my family court proceedings.
No different than commenting on Pete Hegseth. It's the same exact.
And Trump.
And Trump.
Yeah. But they're willing to vote for Trump.
Oh, by the way, we have State Central Committee coming up. We're going to go together, right? Alex Plekish threw his hat in the ring. Alex, if you're listening, maybe you want to resign from this effort, because I'm going to stand up at State Central. I'm going to tell 350 delegates that you contacted me personally and asked me to work against Donald Trump in this election cycle. And David Hann also worked against Donald Trump. And, these people are in the way. We need people that are actually with the movement now, because the movement prevailed. So the fact that they're trying to hang on to power.
Oh, they got Donald Trump to stand up at the Minnesota rally in St. Cloud and say that David Hann is the man.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. He knows what's going on up here. You were with me at the Donald Trump dinner. That's when we walked in there and you waded into that group of Palestinian full protesters. Mm-hmm. Remember when the lectern started to fall apart and the thing was coming apart at the seams, and Donald Trump looked over at Tom Emmer and he goes, I thought you liked me, Tom. You must not like me. And everybody knew exactly what he was saying, right?
Yeah.
We knew.
Okay.
So, anybody that wants to have that redemptive process of republicanism, that kind of, I've gone to church and I've confessed my sin, politically, that means coming before the American people and saying, I made a mistake, I won't do it again. And I think that the people in this state that are political leaders that have done this to Minnesotans and to the country could come right on here on HEBROES and sit down right here at the table and explain why.
Don't hold your breath. Not going to happen.
$3 trillion of additional debt since that lion went down.
Don't hold your breath. Not going to happen. These people would rather die than come forward and have an honest conversation.
Well, then we got to clip them out and make sure that their political careers come to an end, don't we?
Not for us to decide.
No, it's the people.
People got to decide.
People got to show up.
We'll see.
That's what this is all about.
It's coming. State Central Committee's coming. We get to see who people really are. To me, I just smile and say, what will be, will be.
Right.
I'm not here to, I'm like a used car salesman, right? It's like
for every ass, there's a seat.
Yeah, well, you gonna buy this motherfucker or not? I'm not here to sell you on the thing. You're here looking for a used car. You obviously need a car. You either gonna buy this motherfucking car or you're not. I don't, what do you want me to tell you? It's a used car. It's like, you want me to tell you about the bells and whistles and the durability of a used car? This motherfucker could run another 10,000 miles. It could run another 50,000 miles. We don't know anymore. It's well past the point of certainty. Let's say that.
Predict it.
We can't predict it. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. So it's the same way in politics. I'm just going to tell you what it is. And there's a good metaphor because our political party is a used car. Our political culture is a used car. And I'm just going to tell you what it is. You're going to buy it or not. Now, in this instance, I'd be counter used car salesman and tell you shouldn't buy it. But yet some people still do.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they
do.
What
we're going to try to do here in Minnesota, if you're in Minnesota, I'm going to ask you to please spend 3 to 6 hours a year, 6 hours of your year, and become a delegate so that we can get some control over who the party is endorsing. Because if we send, Royce, you didn't win this Senate deal. And we talked about this. There's a couple senators that are maybe okay, but basically 90 of those 100 senators are no good. And this is a big problem. We have a long way to go. We just got a little toehold in here. And Donald Trump is still president-elect. He didn't make it in yet. We got a long way to go.
Yeah, no doubt.
We got to get everybody on deck here.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. That's it.
It's been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy. HEBROES, the great Professor Penn, thanks for joining us again. Remember to subscribe to the Professor Penn podcast, which premieres on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Central. That's Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7:30 p.m. Central. Subscribe, like, comment, share the Professor Penn podcast. We'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, Real America's Voice for the Royce White Show. And back on Monday. Hopefully back on Monday with another episode of Please Call Me Crazy. I don't know. We may do a deep dive on the schism between Christianity and citizenship.
That's a good one.
Oh, I like that one.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Or we could just go back to AI. I mean, AI is the gift that keeps on giving. Actually, both are probably connected.
Related. And if we tie it up with a conversation of what republicanism is and meant to be, it resolves a lot of these issues. That's what I've just determined myself is our movement doesn't really understand the ideological framework they're moving in. And I think even the people that are not in the movement, if they understood the beauty of the Republican philosophy, not the party, the philosophy, I think we can make hay with that deal. I do.
Think so?
I do, because I don't think people know what the hell's going on. Yeah. I listen to these conservatives.
You're a lot less cynical than me.
Yes, I am. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. That's true. But hey, it takes all kinds, doesn't it?
It does.
It does.
I surely hope you're right. I'm not too cynical to wish that you're not right and I'm wrong.
Well, it's my father. My father was a professor, and he believed
I do think that the general intelligence and education and awareness, culturally, politically, philosophically, linguistically, has been intentionally decayed.
We can only go up,
right? Because
it's so far down.
And we do actually come across that a lot. Or we did on the campaign trail, where I'd go and speak in front of a crowd for an hour and a half, and people would genuinely come up afterward and say, "I've never heard some of that stuff." So yeah, there is some of it out there. I'm not saying there's not, but what I'm saying is the people who are in charge, that actually
they're not sharing.
They know exactly what's going on,
but they're not sharing with everybody else. Right?
They know. they know. They can't be converted, in my opinion. I'm not going to say, I don't want to preclude miracles. They could be converted. But what I'm saying is the conversion of the one who knows exactly what lie he's telling is much less likely than the person who has never encountered the gospel before.
Are you talking about Tom Emmer?
I wasn't thinking of him specifically,
I am.
but
I'm thinking about that lie that budget debt ceiling raise was the greatest cut to government spending in American political history.
Yeah.
Tom Emmer, I would really like you to come on here and let's get reconciled on this one because we're $3 trillion more in the hole.
Cut it out. It's
you think it's impossible?
It's getting ridiculous. Tommy Boy wouldn't get anywhere near me. The closest Tommy Boy wants to be near me is in the front row of a Donald Trump rally. Because
he has to.
Because he has to.
Right.
That's the closest he wants to get. He don't want to get anywhere near me with a live microphone whatsoever, and for good reason. Because I'm a whole different caliber of breed. He can run the "we stand with Israel, we stand with the police" thing all he wants to.
First responders.
All you got to do is check that debt ceiling vote, Chief. That's it. You could say
every Republican.
You could say you stand with Israel. You could say you stand with the military. You could say you stand with the police. But when you vote to bankrupt the country, it's pretty clear
who you're standing with. There you go.
There you go.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So
okay. I'm going to quit hoping on that one.
No. Would you come forward and talk about that?
If I was him?
Yeah.
I think that in a time like this, miracles can happen. Because I'm a little bit, a little bit more hopeful. I was saying my father, who was a professor, he believed that with education.
No, we just need to vote these people out.
Well,
I don't give a shit.
But that's only going to happen if we get the American citizens in the political process.
Right.
We got to turn over the inventory.
We just need to vote these people out. I mean, we're putting these people up on a pedestal. I mean,
and then they're judging Pete Heggeston.
Who is Tom Emmer to me? To me,
nobody.
Right. He's nobody to me. Honestly. I mean, you go all the way up and down the chain. It's like, who are you? You're not an intellectual. You don't offer any novel ideas from an intellectual philosophical standpoint. You're not a spiritual guide. It's not like I'm talking to Archbishop Vigano or right. I mean, you're not you're not some hyper skilled artist or craftsman,
engineer.
Right?
Right.
You're not a martial arts coach or trainer. You're not a basketball aficionado.
He could play hockey.
He could.
He was good.
And hockey was a good game, and that's part of the reason why he's a good politician.
That's why he's in there.
Hockey and basketball are the two games that are in perpetual motion. So you got to have a certain sort of mental dexterity in order to play basketball and hockey that is not required to play, let's say, football, baseball. Baseball and football are start and stop games.
Get a little break,
yeah. But basketball, hockey, continuous. You're on defense and you're on offense. Quick.
All the time.
All the time.
It's a little bit like war.
It is. It is. But basketball is a little different. It's a little different. It's a little different. I won't say why, but it's a little different. Let's just say the athletes are a little better. It's been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy. Brought to you by Free People Radio, powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us.
Use that Smashmouth promo code.
Smashmouth. Promo code Smashmouth for 3% off.
On the tires.
On tires, holiday season. We appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. As always, the fight continues. Again, tune in tomorrow to Real America's Voice, 9 a.m. Eastern for the Royce White Show. Godspeed. The people are coming.